Hi, I'm Steelfur Speaks, and this is my guide to all the keywords in all the sets of Flesh and Blood. This is an entire playlist that covers every set that's been released from Flesh and Blood, and when that set has new keywords, we're overviewing what keywords have been added in that set. There won't be a video for every set. Some sets did not add new keywords, so just go through this playlist and just be safe assured that if there was a new keyword added, it's covered, and we're doing this set by set, so even the latest sets are included. We don't really cover generic abilities or keywords after the first set, WTR. So if you're wondering what generic keywords like Battle Worn, Go Again, and all those kind of things are, have a look at that video. That will give you a bit of a brief introduction. This video also assumes you know how to play Flesh and Blood, so you're familiar with concepts like Go Again, etc. And it's really just a refresher for people who are wondering what keywords were introduced when, and what to be wary of if you're looking at a class from a specific set, or you're looking at, you've stepped away from the game for a few sets, and you're wondering where to catch up. So, let's go into Arcane Rising. Arcane Rising sees a return of other, traditional things like Legendary, Battle Worn, Blade Break, and all of those things we saw in WTR. Arcane Rising is the second set, so this is the second video in this playlist. Obviously, go back to WTR if you're starting from scratch, or keep on going if you're looking for something a bit more modern. The four classes introduced in Arcane Rising are Mechanologist, Ranger, Wizard, and Runeblade. And typically the ones that have new keywords are Mechanologist, which has Boost, Ranger, which has Arrows and Reload, and, well, the other two don't really. They have new mechanics, but they don't have specific keywords. So we're going to talk about arcane damage, and we're going to talk about rune chants. So let's get started. So new generic keywords that got added. This is the first time that we saw opt in the game. Opt will always be presented as opt and then a number, and pretty much does what it says here. You look at the top card of your deck, you may put it on the bottom. So opt is considered part of resolving the card. So when you played a card as part of resolving, and for example this becoming a defensive item on the combat chain, you will resolve the opt. So you do it when you play the card, not later. Arcane Rising also added the arcane damage type, and with it came arcane barrier, which is again something you find on lots of different types of equipment as well as generic equipment. This says if your hero will be dealt arcane damage, you may pay 1 resource instead. If you do, prevent 1 arcane damage that source would deal. This arcane barrier is important to understand, so this blocks 1 arcane damage at the cost of 1 resource. If this was Arcane Barrier 2, you could pay 2 resources to prevent 2 damage, but to block 1 damage, you would also have to pay 2 resources, because Arcane Barrier 2 does not work for instances of 1 damage, except when you pay the resources as if it were 2. However, if you had 2 separate instances of Arcane 1 on 2 different pieces of equipment, you could then block 2 you could block 2 Arcane, as you would have 2 instances of Arcane Barrier 1. It's also worth noting that there's a lot of effects in the game that deal 1 damage in spread out amounts, and in those instances you can block Arcane Barrier on those multiple tokens, things like that, unless the damage comes from a single card. So if there's a card called Fault Lightning, for example, that has 2 lines that say deal X amount of damage, that counts as 1 source for Arcane Barrier, and therefore you cannot use Arcane Barrier to block both instances of the damage from that card. You have to instead spread it out. But just important to remember with Arcane Barrier, 1 Arcane Barrier means you can prevent 1 damage. If that's split up into loads of little 1 pings from loads of different cards, you can block it all. If it's a group number that goes above 1, you can only pay 1 to block 1 damage, unless you have Arcane Barrier that matches the damage that's coming. So what is Arcane Damage? Arcane Damage is a new damage type, and really the only thing you need to know about it is that it's direct damage. So it doesn't go on the combat chain. It goes directly to players, and they choose how to deal with it. And the only way really to block it is with Arcane Barrier, or with prevention effects that say prevent the next X damage target card is going to deal, and then you can target the card that is dealing arcane damage. This is commonly found in Wizards, Runeblades, but it can also be found in Illusionists and a few other classes that might have a little bit of arcane damage, but primarily it's a Wizard and Runeblade kind of thing. So let's just talk briefly about Runeblade. So they don't have a keyword, but they do have a new token. Rune Chant is a token, and it's just worth noting that this is you know, when you play an attack action card or activate a weapon attack, destroy this and deal 1 arcane damage to target opposing hero. You can build this up. They don't trigger or get destroyed until you meet the criteria. So really, it's just worth noting that there are heroes that can make rune charts and bring arcane damage to the table, even if they aren't, you know, playing a wizard. So if you're playing it's a rune blade, there is a question, do I need arcane barrier? Are they going to be making rune charts? And that's something to keep in mind. Even though it's not a keyword, it's worth mentioning in this video when we're talking about Arcane Rising. Moving on then to actual keywords. So the Mechanologist class, as seen in Arcane Rising, and of course later in Bright Lights, has the boost keyword. As an additional cost to play Pedal to the Medal, this card, you may banish the top card of your deck. If it's a Mechanologist card, Pedal to the Medal gains Go Again. So there's a few things to note here, of course. You have to banish the top card of your deck. You have to decide when you're playing the card, so you pay for it with your pitch, and then you announce whether or not you're boosting. And once you've done that, you do the boost straight away before the card comes into play, before you resolve the card. So you play it, you boost as part of the additional cost, then you move on to resolving the card. It then checks the top card of your deck. If it's Mechanologist, it gets Go Again. If it's not Mechanologist, it doesn't get Go Again, but you still have to spend the action point to play it. You don't get to see beforehand. You just have to commit. So often mechs will build decks that are full of mech cards, so the boost is guaranteed and they can't miss, or they'll have very few non-mech cards, so they can't miss that often. Boost is very straightforward. There are lots of cards that synergize with boost, so if you've boosted X times or etc, etc. So often the cards are trying to layer boosts on. And it's just worth noting that if you can't pay the cost, so there's no card on the top of your deck, it is a cost. So you cannot gain Go Again without a card to banish. Very relevant if you get to late game. Moving on then to Ranger. So this is the first introduction of the Ranger class as well, and there are 2 keywords that are worth acknowledging here. So Arrow is not a keyword, it's a type of card, but it kind of functions like a keyword for our purposes because it dictates how the game can be played. Arrows can only be played from Arsenal and only if you control a bow. So this is just instantly a check. If you're attacking with an arrow, make sure it's come from your arsenal. Make sure you have a bow in play. All the Ranger weapons are bows, but you know, so you're not going to get confused about that. But you need to make sure this gets into your arsenal somehow before you attack with it. Don't find yourself attacking from hand with an arrow. And it's one of the only attacks that has this kind of text, which is why I say we treat it like a keyword. The other keyword is reload. Reload simply says if you have no cards in your arsenal, you may put a card from your hand face down in your arsenal. So this is how you get arrows in your arsenal. It's one way that you do it. So when you play the card that has reload, when you resolve the card and you resolve its effect, after you've resolved the first line of the effect, you're then going to resolve the second line of the effect. And then you're going to check, I have no cards in my arsenal, and then you can take a card from your hand and put it face down in your arsenal. So those are keywords introduced in Arcane Rising. After this, we're going to move on to Fab's third set, Crucible of War, though there may not be any keywords introduced in that, so we might skip that video. But first thing comes first is these are the things introduced in Arcane Rising, and we continue on with the series with the next set that has new keywords